My last video on aquarist mistakes got a surprisingly good response. A lot of people took it with genuine self awareness and a real willingness to learn. But there was also some fair, reasonable pushback. Too much general talk, not enough concrete examples. Fair point, and I'm listening to the people actually willing to learn. That is, not to the ones who just want their feelings soothed instead of fixing what's actually broken. If pointing out real mistakes bluntly upsets someone, that's honestly not my problem to solve. I'd rather be direct and useful than gentle and useless, because a direct heads up saves fish and shrimp lives, and a soft, vague warning usually doesn't. So let's get into specifics this time, without over explaining every single point. Most of these deserve their own dedicated deep dive, and some already have one elsewhere on this channel or from other sources if you want the full breakdown. The single biggest, most avoidable mistake almost every beginner makes isn't a technical one at all. It's the refusal to actually learn anything, paired with the impulse to just copy whatever someone else did, so that later when it goes wrong, they can say, well, that's what I was told to do, not my fault. That mindset is where basically every other mistake on this list actually comes from. First on the technical list, rushing the tank cycle. Nobody wants to wait the usual few weeks. Nobody wants to bother with bacterial starter products or other methods that speed the process along safely. So fish and shrimp go straight into an uncycled tank and either die fast from ammonia poisoning or die slowly and painfully over the following weeks. Right alongside that is dropping newly bought fish or shrimp straight into your tank with no gradual acclimation at all. No drip method, no float and mix, nothing. And of course, nobody bothers to think about how wildly different two tanks' water parameters might be. Hardness, pH, nitrate, phosphate, you name it. Then, when the new arrivals die, it's always the seller's fault for supposedly shipping sick stock, never the abrupt drop in with zero transition. And yes, someone always shows up to say, well, mine didn't die right away, only after a couple weeks or a couple months, as if that's somehow proof nothing went wrong, conveniently ignoring that healthy fish and shrimp, kept properly, live for years or even decades. Next up, turning off aeration at night. And some people go even further and shut off filtration too because the motor hum or the bubbling noise disturbs their sleep. That trick might get away with itself for a while in a lightly stocked tank with a big volume of water, but sooner or later it catches up with you. This is pure recklessness, plain and simple. Nighttime is exactly when the whole tank needs oxygen the most, and oxygen and filtration are inseparable. No oxygen means no functioning filtration, since the beneficial bacteria doing the filtering, especially in external filters or dense sponge media, start dying off without it. By morning, the damage is already done. A few more aeration misconceptions worth flagging. Yes, surface agitation does help oxygenate the water, but don't rely on that alone in anything with meaningful bioload, especially overnight. Add a proper air source alongside it. Second, pulling air through an internal filter's intake tube is a decent budget friendly trick, and I've used it myself, but I've also personally fished out dead fish because of it. Internal filters clog over time, water flow drops, and air intake stops right along with it, and for whatever reason, that always seems to happen at night. Come morning, it's a disaster and a real regret over skipping a proper air pump to save a few bucks. If the noise bothers you, get a quieter piezo pump instead of cutting corners on aeration altogether. And here's a genuinely wild misunderstanding. Trying to boost CO2 concentration by cutting oxygen supply, as if one gas somehow displaces the other. It doesn't work that way, full stop. Oxygen and carbon dioxide don't react with each other, and neither one pushes the other out. CO2 dissolves faster than oxygen does, and even with genuinely adequate oxygen in the water, an excess of CO2 will still start killing fish and other aquatic life. And even pumping in pure oxygen and CO2 simultaneously, only as much CO2 will actually dissolve as your water chemistry and injection rate allowing. The two gases just don't trade off against each other the way people assume. Moving on to CO2, dosing itself, a genuinely dangerous area for anyone who doesn't know their own water parameters and just starts injecting CO2 blind without even a drop checker, that little device that shows dissolved CO2 concentration through a color changing liquid. It doesn't matter to them that their water might sit above pH 8.5 or carry hardness north of 15 or even 20 degrees, exactly the conditions where that high pH tends to show up. At those parameters, injected CO2 rapidly converts into a form plants can't actually use, meaning most of it and the money spent generating it literally vents into thin air. On the flip side, injecting CO2 into soft water with a pH already at 6.5 or lower causes wild, dangerous pH swings, accelerating the dissolution of snail and shrimp shells, and even damaging plant tissue. Dosing CO2 without testing anything first, just guessing and hoping for the best, doesn't just risk your plants. It usually kills them fast while algae takes over instead. CO2 also speeds up how quickly plants consume macro and micronutrients. So, without tracking those levels or knowing how to read early micronutrient deficiency symptoms in the plants themselves, injecting CO2 just accelerates the plant's decline rather than their growth. Equally reckless, running CO2 without enough light to match it. Photosynthesis, the entire reason for injecting CO2 in the first place, simply doesn't happen without adequate lighting. And yet, plenty of keepers max out CO2 injection while skimping on lighting, either from lack of knowledge or lack of budget, and then wonder why problems start piling up. Another genuinely wild mistake: using pure reverse osmosis or distilled water in a tank, completely stripped, mineral free water with essentially nothing in it. Some people take the phrase running the tank on RO water completely literally and never look into what it actually means. In reality, it means taking RO or distilled water and either cutting it with tap water or remineralizing it with the right salts to hit a target hardness. Pure RO water on its own is functionally zero. Nothing grows in it, not plants, not fish, not bacteria, and fish placed directly into it go into rapid osmotic shock. Next up, skimping on substrate. There's a basic rule of nature and fish keeping worth remembering. The largest bacterial population in any tank, just like in any natural body of water, lives in the substrate first, ahead of external filters, and ahead of internal filters, depending on type. Bacteria are the absolute foundation of this whole hobby. Everything rests on them. Skimp on substrate, and you're directly skimping on your bacterial colony, which means straining your nitrogen cycle and inviting a cascade of problems. Sure, someone running a serious external filtration setup can get away with a bare bottom tank, but ask yourself honestly whether that describes your setup. More substrate generally means more bacteria, which means a more stable nitrogen cycle and overall biological balance. Next up, the chaotic dance of dosing fertilizers without actually understanding them. All over the hobby, people who don't really grasp what macro or micronutrient fertilizers even do start dumping them into their tank just because they've seen others do it. Sometimes following the label, but often not even that. It's the aquarium equivalent of asking a doctor for more pills because you feel impatient. Out of everyone dosing fertilizers, only a small fraction actually test anything, and even fewer understand what's actually deficient or by how much. And here's the part that trips people up: dosing a complete fertilizer blend, even by the book, when only one or two elements are actually lacking, causes an excess of everything else, which stalls plant growth and can trigger algae or bacterial blooms instead. And honestly, in a huge number of cases, fertilizing isn't even necessary at all, since tap water, fish food, and the biological activity of fish and bacteria already supply most of what plants need. Targeted controlled dosing really only becomes necessary with a heavily planted, lightly stocked tank, fast growing species, or water that's genuinely nutrient poor to begin with. Now, for one that tends to ruffle feathers, careless, poorly thought out water changes. Yes, thoughtless water changes are absolutely a real mistake. For keepers without live plants, this usually shows up as pulling 40 to 50% of the water at once and replacing it with untreated tap water at a wildly different temperature, fully saturated with gas, killing off bacteria and fish alike in the process. For planted tank keepers, it often looks different. Perfectly good nitrate and phosphate levels get poured out along with the water, replaced with water of unknown composition, and then the very same nutrients just get dosed straight back in. disrupting the tank's biological balance for no real reason. Others do it purely on a fixed schedule without understanding what they're actually removing or adding, and often end up removing more of the good stuff than the bad. The fix is genuinely simple. Know the parameters of whatever water source you're using for changes, so you're not adding excess nitrate or phosphate on top of what's already in the tank. Whether your tank actually has excess nitrate and phosphate to begin with depends entirely on your setup. Heavily planted, lightly stocked tanks might actually need more nutrients added, not less. For what it's worth, in my own low tech, heavily stocked tanks that I've run for years without water changes, I still occasionally have to dose macro fertilizers, even in soil based setups, simply because certain elements run short over time. Let's talk about unregulated lighting, specifically in planted tanks. This one's less relevant for cyclid setups or tanks without live plants, but for a planted aquarium, it's a real problem. Think about it. Does daylight length in nature stay perfectly fixed? Doesn't it shift by hours depending on the season, with sunrise and sunset drifting earlier or later throughout the year? And yet somehow people assume plants won't care at all about random, inconsistent lighting schedules, while algae absolutely will exploit that inconsistency. Sure, a timer costs a bit of money up front, but replacing dead plants and buying algae treatments over and over ends up costing a lot more in the long run. Next, sudden drastic shifts in water parameters, even when those parameters were bad or genuinely harmful to begin with. Nothing in a tank should change abruptly, including something as simple as lighting intensity. Everyone's familiar with the concept of acclimatization, and everyone knows how rough a sudden climate change feels on the body. Now imagine that same shock happening inside a small, closed system with nowhere to escape to. Fish, like every living thing, can adapt even to genuinely poor conditions over time. So, if a fish has slowly, painfully adapted to living with nitrate at, say, 80 milligrams per liter, or phosphate at 10 milligrams per liter, both genuinely alarming numbers, assuming this happened gradually rather than all at once. And then a well meaning keeper suddenly performs a massive water change to drop those numbers straight down to 10 milligrams per liter nitrate and zero point 0.5 milligrams per liter phosphate. That sudden improvement can be exactly what kills the fish. The same goes for pH. Dosing something to push it down and watching it crash by a full point within half an hour is often enough on its own to cause fish to die. Even a sudden half point swing can be too much. The same logic applies to temperature and plenty of other parameters. Nothing in this hobby rewards sudden movements. Slow and steady wins every time. A few more worth flagging quickly. Never scrub substrate or glass with cleaning products during a tank's normal life. And there's genuinely no need to sterilize or boil new substrate before setup either, unless it's coming from a tank that previously had an infectious disease outbreak. Beneficial bacteria coat everything in a tank: glass, decorations, plants, and especially substrate. So, unnecessary scrubbing and over vacuuming disrupts that balance and kills bacteria for no good reason. Avoid cleaning every single piece of external filter media all at once. And if a deep clean is unavoidable, use a bacterial supplement afterward and skip feeding for a few days. On feeding, avoid feeding right before lights out. Feeding right before the tank goes dark, on top of the near universal habit of overfeeding, is a direct path to fish obesity. The fish eats, then immediately goes dormant for the night, and if there aren't bottom feeders around, leftover food just sits in the substrate and sours. Another common misstep: using clay for root feeding without diluting it. Clay packs densely and dissolves poorly on its own, so plant roots can't actually penetrate it, and it just sits there souring in the substrate. Disturbing it later releases a cloud of debris, and pulling out fully decomposed clay is like setting off a small bomb in your tank. Clay should only ever be mixed into soil at a low ratio, never used on its own. Last point, and maybe the most important one: why does a tank ever get to the point where a keeper is suddenly asking why every fish is covered in something or the whole tank is smothered in algae? Weeks into a problem developing. Where was that keeper's attention when it started on just one fish? When behavior first changed? When plant color first shifted? When growth rate first slowed? When the very first algae appeared? A tank only reaches crisis point because nobody was actually looking at it regularly. The whole reason to keep an aquarium is to watch it. So watch it. If any of this landed a bit harshly, that's intentional. A gentle nudge rarely changes anyone's habits, but a direct one sometimes does. And, disagree with something here? Say so in the comments.